Welcome back, Notre Dame fans, to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. It's Monday, September 30th. We are a couple days removed from Notre Dame winning their third game in a row, moving to 4-1 with a 31-24 victory over Louisville. It wasn't easy, guys. Louisville outnumbered Notre Dame in just about every way. Notre Dame only had 11 first downs, but they were opportunistic in the first quarter. Their defense got better in the second quarter. Riley Leonard played particularly well when he was given opportunities to do some things downfield. And, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't stress-free, but Notre Dame led for 50 minutes and came away with a victory.
Yeah, I like the game control they had was impressive, especially considering they lost immediate control with the opening kickoff fumble. Thought that response right away by the offense, one of the most important offensive drives, well, the most important drive of the season to date, other than the one where they didn't get a field goal to beat Northern Illinois. Just kudos to the defensive staff and young players because I mean you played part of that game against Louisville without your number one, number two, and number three corner from last week. Think of it, 1, 2, and 3. Morrison missed a chunk. To be able to withstand that and actually dominate against the run in the second half, I don't think I noticed how much they dominated the run in the second half defensively because they got gashed so much in the first. It's that
Yep.
first impression, but really good effort by young players when they needed it most.
JB, that's a heck of a performance against a really, and mentioning what Tim is mentioning about the cornerbacks, against a really good receiving core that we didn't realistically think that Colin Lacey would play a significant role, but boy, did he play a significant role.
Yes.
And a Louisville team that clearly came in with a chip on its shoulder and played an incredibly physical game. That was a team, maybe I said this Saturday night on the post-game show, I can't recall, but the Louisville played right up to, if not through the whistle over the course of that game. It was very much a Louisville team that came in angered. I don't know if it was just the opportunity of beating a team with the prestige of Notre Dame, or if they felt like they weren't getting enough attention at their strong 3-0 start, or what it was. But that was a very motivated, very angry, physical Louisville football team, and a great point from UTO about playing without their three corners at moments of that game. Let's not also forget they're playing it without their top two edge rushers
Yeah.
almost the entirety of that game. Jordan Botello, the second game without him after he was lost for the year at Purdue, and then Boubacar Traore, who was off to a fabulous start on Saturday, ended up missing basically, I think, all of the final three quarters, more or less. So, and obviously the optimism is waning there for Boubacar being able to return this season. But there were guys out everywhere. There were guys out on both sides of the ball. We saw it even late when Sullivan Absher had to be inserted at guard because Pendleton was nicked up. It's a very beaten and bruised team, as we noted from Notre Dame, but that was not only, as you call it, TO, a must not lose game, because you didn't want to call it a must win game the last weekend of September, but it was
Right.
damn sure a game that Notre Dame could not lose. And I think we saw some competitive character from Notre Dame in that game. We saw a lot of flaws still, but if Notre Dame can find a way offensively to build on what it did in the first and fourth quarters, and defensively to carry forward what it did the entire second half, and harness that over the next couple of weeks, then there's still plenty of runway for this to be a much improved Notre Dame football team.
Tim, who was on the field for Notre Dame defensively when I said, look how young that defense is? I mean, I know it was Bryce Young and Logan Thomas
Yeah,
at,
but
at the
you had
end spots.
KVA out there, you had Bowen. I mean, Osbury was in for Bowen a lot. Bowen's really streaked playing well recently,
He had a
after that
really,
rough
real,
game
I thought
too.
he had a really good game.
And they certainly had Leonard Moore and Adon Schuler out there because
Yeah,
they had no option but to have Leonard Moore and Adon Schuler
right.
out there. It was, yeah, the turnaround. I say this on every show I'm ever on now. The fact that I can go on these shows nationally for radio and say Notre Dame's best unit is its secondary and its corners. I mean, you could have never said that in time covering Notre Dame, because even when it was great in like '02 and 93 and 92 and 89, 80, those still wasn't the best unit. They still had
Right.
better units, right? It's just
Yeah.
crazy and it's this deep. Leonard Moore, man, he looks the part too. I don't even mind the people calling him Leonard Sauce Moore right now because he just looks like that when he walks out there.
Well, and body language. I mean, you can just sense that he has a ton of confidence out there right from the very beginning. He makes a big hit. He did get beaten deep,
Yeah.
at
Well,
the
he
end,
had good
but
coverage though. He had good
he
coverage
did
on
he
the
did have
BD.
good coverage. It was perfectly thrown. Tons of respect for Tyler Shuck. Tons of respect for Isaac Brown, who's a really good back. why he didn't get that 4th-and-1 carry
I
as opposed to Donald Chaney. You know that he's getting that first down because what
yes.
he needed inches over what Donald Chaney is capable of doing, the least quick of the running backs that they used when in the
I
aftermath
called him a
of that.
Purdue running back during the game, remember?
Yeah,
Donald Chaney.
exactly. Exactly. Reflecting upon it, it's like, man, I'm glad they gave it to Donald Chaney. And, credit to KVA for rerouting Donald Chaney. Uh, Xavier Watts gets there. Donovan Heinisch certainly played a key role on that fourth
Yes,
down
he did.
stop as
Yeah.
well. So, but yeah, Leonard Moore, really, really good. Riley Leonard, much, much better. If you look at the last 2.5 quarters against Miami of Ohio, the first half of this game, I think it's a little unfair to blame the lack of productivity on him in the second half because Notre Dame, buttoned things up a little bit more. The 3 running plays with Riley Leonard, I understand that you don't want to throw it because if it's incomplete, then everybody's in an uproar about stopping the clock. And I was thinking at the time, one of these the ball has to get in Jeremiah Love's hands
Right.
because he's good after contact and he's elusive. And if you get one more first down without Louisville having any timeouts remaining, you're in good shape. But I didn't agree with that approach, or even I put this in Thursday thoughts, like a jet sweep to Harrison. Maybe that's a little dangerous. Then fake the jet sweep and then run Riley Leonard that way. I don't feel like that, many times this is a second guess. These are things that were going through my head as they were doing that, and it gave Louisville one more chance. And then Jeff Brom and Tyler Shuck did a poor job of managing the clock, and Notre Dame picked up a delay of game penalty, and boy, that sure helped.
Yeah, and the Notre Dame crowd rose to the occasion late there. I think was an impact in getting that delay of game penalty. I agree. I thought that the run play there late when you're trying to just completely wind it down was wholly unimaginative. And we've seen them do some much better things with Riley Leonard and giving him an opportunity to get out in space, get out on the perimeter. And I know that there's still some battle scars from Riley overthrowing really badly a couple of early tosses last week against Miami of Ohio. But in one of those situations, I think you give him a true run pass option. Maybe you're sliding Mitch Evans out there into the flat like you've successfully done in some other situations and giving Riley at least a chance to maybe throw it to Mitch if the run's not there. So didn't cost them. We talk about learning moments for the players. I guarantee you the coaches are going back and watching video and finding some learning moments for themselves as well.
In the last, I put this in tail of the tape, and it's progress for Riley Leonard in the last 6.5 quarters. He's completed 32 of 45. That's 71% for 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interferences drawn, no interceptions, and 2 sacks. That's still only 9.5 yards per completion and 6.7 yards per attempt, but that's an improvement. That's much more. And then in those 6.5 quarters, he's run the football 23 times for 197 yards. That's 8.5 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns, a 50-yarder, a 43-yarder, and that's coming after the strong performance in the first half against Purdue. So I know that I know that there is, certainly a segment that doesn't want him to be the quarterback, and that's fine. I get that, but the fact is that he's been playing pretty good football here recently, and that should be acknowledged as well.
Yeah, and he wasn't the guy who turned the ball over on Saturday. And when he doesn't turn the ball over, he is obviously by far the most effective engineer for this Notre Dame offense.
Anybody or anything else you guys want to mention from the game? Obviously, we covered it very thoroughly with our instant analysis and our overtime. And
We talked about young guys. Xavier Watts was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic
man,
game by Xavier
his
Watts.
his instincts are, I guess he's created his instincts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
He
right.
really,
He's a
I
wide
mean, really,
receiver.
and initially he had none for the safety position, and would rightfully or
Right,
would
of course not.
willingly admit that. But
Well,
yeah, he's come a long way.
Yeah, well, and for a long time, as he shuttled back and forth between positions, I think we all sort of talked, well, the guy's just a football player. Well, now they've given him a home, and he's honed that football player ability into being an elite safety. And then I don't think you can say enough about Rod Hurd and Jordan Clark and what they had to do.
Really did great.
And I know some people were upset, and
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman was covering. Marcus Freeman's got a new poker tail. When he covers his mouth like this, he's dog cussing you. And that's what he was doing to Jordan Clark for getting that penalty. Jordan Clark saying on social media, I was not raised to let somebody spit in my face. I wish I haven't been able to pick that up on TV copy, but if that is the case, then I certainly can understand why he would have leaned his head in there. Unfortunate situation. Didn't ultimately harm Notre Dame too terribly much. And Jordan Clark won't make that mistake again. But
Yeah, I would
those
have.
guys,
I just want him to wait. I absolutely agree. You're going to retaliate to that. It's just such an obvious penalty. There's frontier justice all over the football field you can find if you wait a couple snaps, man. That's
yeah,
what piles were made for. That's
yeah.
what a
Well,
pile's made for. I mean, it's just one that, and I totally get it. You get spit in your face. Then get more out of it than your headbutt. I mean, I'm saying like start a fight. It's a 15-yard penalty too. That was impossible not to call. So I don't know. I think you'll learn frontier justice as when the NFL days come around and you find other ways of getting back.
I have to say, and I said this in Tail of the Tape. Did I say Thursday Thoughts again earlier? Probably did. Tail of the Tape. Um, you, like I don't say this about opponents because I try to be fair, and there's always accusations about this or that. But Louisville, I mean, they do take a lot of cheap shots, and they wait.
Yeah.
The opportunity that they wait for is the ball carrier that has just hit the ground, and the guy behind him then rams his
Evans,
helmet.
bad. That was a
Yeah.
bad one on Mitchell Evans. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm not even including that one.
Oh,
I don't think that's the two that I'm thinking about. What
Well, there
number
was one with
93?
Riley Leonard and one with a ball carrier. You're exactly
yeah.
right, TP.
Number 93 and number 35. They look for that opportunity when the guy has just hit the ground, and then they can give him one more shot. And the player is really, really vulnerable to a shot like that because
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
going flat down, and that's what we thought. I mean, initially we thought like Leonard's injury was a result of or was a shoulder thing again. Didn't realize at the time that it was just getting the wind knocked out of him, but that's enough to take you out of the play for.
To be
Uh,
clear, I'm on Jordan Clark's side. I just wanted more creative response than the headbutt because you don't
yeah,
get
no,
anything out of
fair
the
enough.
headbutt.
I
Yeah,
mean,
like you
that's
might
a
as well
tough.
fight. You might as well fight as if you're going to headbutt a guy and get 15 yards. It's
Yeah,
the same thing. I mean,
Tia, we've discussed this before. Every hill is a hill to die on.
yeah, no, I agree, but you just find you could approach it a little later. That all right, it's tough for maybe a nickel and a receiver to find a pile,
Correct, correct.
but
That was my. It's not a linebacker running back.
that's
It's
true.
different.
That's true.
okay, let's move on to the injury situation. We're waiting to hear from the results of the MRI for Boubacar Traore, but we're not anticipating positive news. So, I mean, where do you go from here? I guess we got some questions in the second segment, so we won't go there about where they would go from here for defensive line, but or defensive end in particular. And then Jordan Faison, it's going to be very difficult for him to be back in 2 weeks. It was the same foot/ankle that he injured. If you guys saw the way his foot was jammed into the ground and flattened out, that can't be good at all. Notre Dame needs Gabe Rubio back. Excuse me. I think we're kind of anticipating at this point for him to be back for Stanford, right?
I think so. I think there's been mild progress. Now he still didn't dress on Saturday, which lets you know he was
Yeah.
not even close this week. But with 2 more weeks and that sort of time frame, there'd initially been optimism that if everything went perfectly, it would have been possible for him to be back for Louisville. So I think that they need him back, and I think there's optimism they could have him back, even if it's 15 or 20 snaps against Stanford. They've got to have him for this upcoming stretch of games before their next bye week. And honestly, they need him desperately right now. Like the interior of the Notre Dame defense, we talk about what they've lost on the edge, and it's certainly showing. But the interior of the Notre Dame defensive line needs some help right now.
I think if he plays 5 snaps against Stanford, it helps going forward. Now, it doesn't help Stanford that much, but it's kind of like Josh Burnham, we now know is back because he
Right.
did get in for 4 snaps. remember, Gabriel Rubio hasn't played all year and he hasn't played a lot of football. It's not like Gabriel Rubio walks in and plays 25 effective snaps right now. So I'd love to get him ready for Georgia Tech, and I assume he would be helpful for Navy. Um, you never really 100% know who works out well against Navy because of the cut blocks and everything that happens up front. But I think Rubio as a senior has probably gone against a lot of that at scout team practices at
I
least.
don't think those guys cut as much as they.
No, but they still get you. I
No,
mean, the
no
blocking
doubt.
scheme is still way different than just putting your best 11 players out there.
One
And
quick thing on Jordan Faison, I would note, I agree, it's the same ankle. It looked bad. He obviously was very frustrated in having to leave the field. He did feel good enough post game to strike a pose and drop an L's down with some of his teammates. So might have been adrenaline in the moment, but maybe that L down after the game is a sign that the arrow's pointing up for Faison to possibly be back in a couple of weeks.
There were a lot. I wish I had taped it. I didn't. I wanted to soak it all in. And there were a lot of, the players were doing L and then turning it down, and they were taunting the daylights out of Louisville.
I got a
So
pretty good video or two from colleagues recently sent to me. There.
Yeah. And, Christian Gray was very demonstrative. Jeremiah Love became extremely demonstrative. You saw the Louisville players starting to converge on them. Some mediators from both sides started to intervene, but I saw a couple, excuse me, support staff guys from Louisville that were pissed and going in that direction. So, I mean, I didn't see nobody threw a punch. I didn't see any physical contact between players, but it looked like it was about to explode, and that would have been a really ugly situation. But Notre Dame, the players' reaction told you a lot about some of the things that were going on during the game, the spitting incident, the near late hits or through the echo of the whistle, as you would say, JB. So there was a lot of bad blood there. When's Notre Dame play Louisville next?
It's
I don't
a while
know.
away if they play
Yeah,
back
I
to
don't
back.
know off the top of my head, so that'll dissipate over time. But yeah, I would say this game was more physical than A&M game. Is that fair? Or at least thereabouts.
Yeah, no, I think so. The defensive line, Gelati was a physical. He was battering on that not touchdown, the long gain for Jaden Harrison. Ashton Gelati goes projectile devices on the offensive lineman on that one. That's a miracle that worked out that well. They were bundling Notre Dame up front. If you're talking physicality that way too, not only echo of the whistle, I thought it was a very physical game in the second half.
Yeah, I would say this was pretty on par from a physicality, far chippier.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed myself for not going down there. I was trying to finish my work up top. I didn't go down for the final 5 minutes, but I did see because of that on the last couple kneel downs, they were getting into it on the kneel downs. Like
they were.
Yes, the linemen were really getting into it. One Louisville guy did try the old school dive over the top and try to hit Leonard with the ball. I mean, you could go for the ball that way too. As a kid watching TV, I always wondered why not everybody did it. It's because you're probably going to get some frontier justice, as I say, later on in life if you keep doing that. But Coogan was about to get in a fight. He stopped it. Then he shook Gelati's hand. Gelati walked away from Freeman, but I don't think he saw Freeman try to shake his hand. Then Gelati came back and shook Freeman's hand. And Jeremiah Love did a Ozzie Smith backflip thing in the middle of all of Louisville's players and Notre Dame's players. And I was like, that's something's going on here. You don't normally do that. And
I can't remember if Jaden Thomas pardon me, joined him as well. I saw that happen live, and I thought there was one other player. I usually, in-game situations, also shoot photos for our use at Football Scoop. I have not gotten to download my photos yet from Saturday night's game. I do know I've got some of those L-down photos, and I'm looking forward to kind of parsing through the images and seeing what all I might have gotten via my camera that I wasn't realizing I was getting with the naked eye.
Before segment 2, I know Jack Freeman knows I love a good tunnel fight, and I need the tunnels back together. If the tunnels were back together this last game, that would have been a problem.
That would have been bad. And if you wondered why or what it looked like, why Louisville takes Ashton Gelati and moves him inside sometimes, the matchup against Rocco Spindler was a really bad one.
What's he doing in college, man? Jesus.
Man, I have no idea. He's a beast. Hey, and we'll wrap up segment 1 here, but let's say this because I think that the second half can it, are they playing not to lose and what have you? Notre Dame just beat a good football team, man. They just beat a really good football team, and I know they didn't outstat them, but they jumped on them early. They got the edge. If the scoop and score by Logan Thomas happens, Notre Dame's up by 17 with 12 minutes to go. The game's essentially over then.
Right.
Louisville can't run the football anymore. It's got to be pass. Al Golden has his defense pin their ears back, and they're getting after Shuck, and they either get a couple more sacks or they get an interception. And that was just it was the right call, but that was just just split second, not in Notre Dame's favor there. But Notre Dame played a really, really solid football game, came on strong in the second half. We'll talk about both defenses in the second half that really caught up to the offenses. But it's a big win for Notre Dame. It was a must win, and they went out and got it. They were aggressive in the first half, not so much offensively in the second half, but they shut down the running game in the second half. Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. Segment 2, Burning Up the Boards, coming up.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. Our first question, ND Fans 08. JB mentioned on Thursday's pod that ND had done some motivational type stuff throughout last week ahead of the Louisville game. Is he able to dive into that anymore, or was it more of a, hey, remember this team kicked your tail last season?
No, and I really appreciate this person bringing it to my attention because I actually meant to divulge this information on overtime post-game Saturday night. So apologies that I'm an airhead. Thank you for the question. Marcus Freeman instructed Notre Dame technology facilities people, whatever, to play on continuous loop last year's Louisville game on basically every TV in the locker room, all throughout the Goog, all last week. You want to know what contributed to some of that chippiness? Notre Dame players for 7 consecutive days, 6 days, whatever, from last Sunday till kickoff, were inundated with the Louisville win over the Irish from 2023. My understanding is it never stopped playing, particularly on the TVs in the locker room. It was everywhere the players turned. Marcus Freeman wanted to drive home the message that was not who Notre Dame was a year ago, and it better not be who Notre Dame is this year.
All 5 turnovers, I'm sure, were included. All 5 Sam Hartman turnovers were included. He turned it over 5 times. That's one thing that Leonard's done a good job of, other than the
one that destroyed a football season.
the foolish decision. But I think that was injury related.
Yes, I think so too.
But be that as it may, he can't make that play. But yeah, I'm sure they were sick of it. And Jason Garrett talked about the Louisville program, and it's in my Thursday thoughts. Just the makeup of their program. They do stuff like that. They do create chippy situations. So it came to a little bit of a head, but it certainly worked for Notre Dame. They were ready to play, 60 minutes. And when you think about, they withstood the challenge. 19 first downs to 11, time of possession, 22 less plays. They were up against it, and they withstood the challenge.
You know who Notre Dame plays next, right? Stanford.
I do
2 weeks
know that.
of Stanford 2022 bye week.
Oh, well, that's a good
going
idea.
on. You can go ahead and remember what happened last time you played Stanford.
That's a good idea. JVND Fan 1. The O-line seemed to start the game really well, but then struggled. What did you guys see as the primary reason or reasons for the change in play?
Well, I do think we have to give credit sometimes to what we often acknowledge from Notre Dame when they say settled in and adjusted to what a team is doing, like Al Golden often does. When that game became straight up, line versus line, try to beat the man in front of you, it was advantage Louisville up front against Notre Dame's currently constructed offensive line. I think Louisville settled in to they didn't withstand it. They gave up 21 points. So they gave up 14 quick points plus the short field. After that, I have a stat for you. First 3 drives, Notre Dame's play efficiency, so good play or not, 70%. First 3 drives. Last 9 drives, Notre Dame's play efficiency, 14%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
it can't just be. I mean, some of that is the ball is how guys play up front too. They were whipping Notre Dame up front.
they have a really good defensive front, and Notre Dame's defensive front held Louisville to 29 yards rushing on 15 carries in the second half. I mean, it was true of Notre Dame as well. Maybe not quite to the same extent because Notre Dame only had 11 first downs for the game, but I think both defensive lines, really settled in, or defensive fronts really settled in, and gave their offenses a chance to win it. Notre Dame wasn't nearly as aggressive as Louisville was offensively, but I mean, Notre Dame's offensive line. They're not going to consistently push around a defensive line like Louisville's. They're not equipped to do that. They were equipped to do it last year with Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, and they couldn't do it.
And they didn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I thought this game was to the question. I thought this game showed how badly Notre Dame needs Billy Schroth back sooner rather
Yeah,
than
you
later.
did mention that on overtime. That was a good point, or an instant analysis. That was a very good point. He would really help.
We should have mentioned.
They miss Ashton Craig and Billy Schroth, especially the way that those two had an already palpable chemistry and work together. But Coogan has been very solid at center, but they really, really need Billy Schroth back sooner rather than later. Can he be back for Stanford? That was the initial optimism. I know we were a little skeptical, high ankle sprain. We'll find out more, I'm sure, on a week from today. There's no real media or any access whatsoever this week, but that's one for all the injuries, and they have mounted for Notre Dame, and it is becoming one of those snake bite years. Last year Notre Dame stayed pretty healthy, except at wide receiver where they had no depth. This year Notre Dame is having its depth tested at all of its best areas, and that's specifically the offensive line and the secondary.
I think Coogan's done a pretty decent job. I thought there were moments for Spindler. When Spindler gets in space, he's a pretty big dude to deal with in space. But he had the false start penalties, and it was Mike Denbrock said there's a reason why Craig and Schroth were the starters from the beginning of the season, so they need them back. They're not going to get Craig, as JB said, we'll get an update probably a week from today, or we'll hear some things along the way and try to pass it along on Thursday's podcast if we hear some updates. Tim, you want to ask
this
next
one? Yep.
Okay.
Irish Dodge has a question for Tim Priester. Tim, what do you think of Leonard's throwing mechanics? I'm no expert, so just curious on your thoughts. I noticed his TD pass to Greathouse looked 3/4, and I hadn't noticed that in previous throws.
Well, I certainly don't claim to be an expert either, but I've seen a lot of throws in my life, and I don't like his arm slot for most of his throws. Like what Riley Shuck did when he threw that incredible touchdown pass to the back of the end zone to Ja'Cory Brooks. There are times where you have to change your arm motion, but I don't like throws. I don't like quarterbacks that throw with their arm so far away from their body. You'd like to see it more over the top and compact, because I just think that you lose your accuracy the more you bring your arm away from your body. This is where your momentum's going, and you bring your arm away from your body. I don't think it's a good thing to do. But we've seen that this year. It wasn't just Saturday. He's done that most of the year. And there's a comfort zone in sliding down and throwing that sometimes, but I don't think that you're as accurate as you are if you stay strong and keep your momentum going forward and bring your arm over the top.
Yeah, it's not prototypical. It's a little bit unconventional. He can deliver in a more classic manner and has at times, but he's not done it overly consistently. I think what we see is what Riley Leonard has evolved into from a personal comfort level through the years, and he's thrown at so many different arm angles because his legs and mobility are so much a part of him specifically at the quarterback position that he's not dropping back and just standing in a 5-step drop very often and throwing from a real secure pocket in a prototypical pro style sort of way. He's just sort of got his own methodology that he's found that is most effective for him. Again, we've seen him on the practice field deliver it in a more natural sort of textbook way, but in the games, that's just not been what he's done very often. Yeah, it wasn't just Saturday that he did that. He had some throws even at Purdue that he went sidearm or changed angles when he was hitting the tight end and some other wideouts.
I think they're, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is, I mean, that's a really unique cat, and he's capable of doing so many things from so many different arm angles. But as somebody, growing up in the game, did Terry Bradshaw and Dan Marino and John Elway come down to the side, or did they stay strong and come over the top and fire bullets? The game has changed a little bit, and I understand. I don't even know if back in the day it was like, okay, well, sometimes you have to change your arm angle to complete a pass. That's definitely in play today, and I understand it. Mahomes is the best at it, but
the last 5 quarterbacks mentioned on this podcast, just for note, are Riley Leonard, Patrick Mahomes, Terry Bradshaw, Dan Marino, and John Elway. I want to just make sure that no other podcast has ever had that happen, unless it happened in Leonard's house, and I don't think that happened there either.
I doubt it. Tim, your opinion on arm slots? And
I do think that nowadays you have to be able to change your arm slot more, but I want Riley Leonard to be a 69% passer over the top that occasionally changes his arm slot like Tyler Shook did on that touchdown pass. I don't know if you need, that's why it's a great question, is that's a weird one to do it on. 3/4 release for Jaden Greathouse down the post with plenty of time. That seems like that's a standard step into the throw and deliver for me.
Right. And I actually thought from the 9th floor that it's like, dude, get on top of it and fire that. Because I didn't know whether that safety was going to be able to peel off from Collins, and go make a play. He knew he had time. I get that. And it was very
he did know he had time. Yeah.
Right.
But
very
let's
catchable
remember
for Greathouse. But go ahead, JB.
Let's remember what Riley Leonard said after the game, that when Greathouse and Harrison were so open, he got a little bit nervous about blowing it, about missing the layup. So I think he's already in his mind making that throw and coming at a 3/4 angle because he doesn't want to go over the top and overthrow blow this huge chunk opportunity for Notre Dame. So I do think in the moment he probably process super fast. I got to get this out there, but I can't put too much on it because we can't blow this.
Yeah,
I think that's fair, but not great.
Well, yeah, you want him to feel like when he needs to dial up his fastball, he's going to have his best four-seamer and he's going to put it where he needs to put it. And maybe those 2 throws and the next 2 weeks of getting a little healthier and getting some more work in, maybe that's the launching point for more accuracy moving forward, or more confidence that he can have the accuracy moving forward. But when Riley Leonard himself says post game, man, those are the ones that make me the most nervous when they're that open. That gives you an idea.
It does. One of the questions submitted brought his specific comment up, and no, you don't want your quarterback saying I freaked out when I saw how wide open he was, or whatever he said.
That freaked me out was a great response in practice. He's funny to watch talk those post games things because there's none of it's fake. I mean, it's just
he's very animated.
Yeah.
He's very animated, which that's endearing. But when he doesn't play well,
right. Well, that's what I thought it was great. The post Purdue game one. Before we keep talking about this, obviously the playing poorly is what makes people mad. But post Purdue, and he was asked post game, when's the last time you had this much fun on the football? He's like, well, I wasn't last week. It was just like that. To say that out loud, it's quite obvious. You got to be able to say that out loud, and it was refreshing to see it.
We have 2 questions here. One from Tater's dad: are Bryce Young and or Josh Burnham athletic enough to get playing time at Viper, or is it Logan Thomas and Junior Tui Alamaka for the duration? And then from Do Your Job 23, how would you handle the strong side defensive end and Viper reps the rest of the way given injuries? Do they go bigger with some strong side defense ends playing Viper at times, or use Snead or KVA a bit in passing downs? We've talked about this in recent weeks, but now it's an acute situation with both Botello and Traore out.
Yeah, they definitely are going to have to rep it once in a while because they're one injury away from needing a backup Viper. Burnham was moved from Viper to the strong side because they liked him less at Viper and more on the strong side. And I tried to word it that way because they didn't love what he was doing at Viper and they thought he was a good fit on the strong side. He's athletic, but so the question is, because there's 3 healthy strong side ends, is one of them cross-trained? It's either that or, I mean, you could easily get by with Jalen Snead and KVA doing their roles right now where they come in as pass rushers, but I think someone has to rep there at some point now.
I would think maybe it's Bryce Young. I think we've all been struck by his athleticism in spring and in preseason camp. I specifically can remember noting how very early on in practice sessions that they were working with Bryce, even dropping off the edge into some coverage situations. And I think that that gives you an idea of their belief in his talent. The other thing I've remarked on many times before and will continue to do so is his wingspan. So he covers a lot of space, an extra space, because his arms are so freaking long. And sometimes that can help you make up if you initially bust or if you're initially beat on a play, or you do need to have more awareness about what's going on the perimeter or a guy sliding out. His arms help him cover up some mistakes at times, and his athleticism. Look, the way he's consistently among the first guys down the field on kickoff coverage, that gives you an idea.
Yeah.
He likes to compete. Like some of his other teammates and people in the program have told me when they've done their sprints and stuff, like Bryce Young wants to compete in those sprints, and we see that mindset on kickoff coverage. So if they're going to do someone there, I would think it would be Bryce Young. But you also wonder how much did being out hurt Burnham from a mental rep standpoint. How rusty is he going to be moving back? I think it would be hard to overload his workload as long as he's been out.
I agree, JB, that if it's anybody, it's Bryce Young. And I do want to say, Tua Alamaka's been around football the last 2 weeks. He's done a nice job. He had fewer busts, I thought, against Louisville than he did the previous week against Miami of Ohio. He's showing up around the football, and that's huge progress for him because he had a very difficult time doing that. Of course, RJ Oben is still in the mix on the strong side. We can say what we want about productivity or whatever. He's got to be on the field. Not 50 snaps, but he has to be on the field. I don't know other options. Somebody asked about Brennan Vernon. I don't think that he's in the mix.
He's not in the mix.
He's
already been moved to the strong side.
Yeah. So not a great situation. Still keeping our fingers crossed until we hear something definitive on Traore.
Oben did have 3 tackles Saturday. I thought you still see him either getting washed out or disappearing on too many plays. But I know specifically he had a really key tackle right at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I wrote his name down 3 times positively. I've not done that before. You're right. He had one right at the line of scrimmage in the first quarter, maybe early second. And then I wrote his name down 2 times. 2 is better than 1. I wrote his name down twice.
Yeah. And again, credited with 3 tackles. So that was a mark forward for him. Again, he's another player you specifically point to and hope that after this first bye week, he finds more of the production that brought him to Notre Dame in the first place.
On a related note, from Who JND fan, saw Jalen Snead walk up the tunnel alone before the team sang the alma mater. Is there any update on this?
Well, it's not an ideal situation. Marcus Freeman is not a fan at all of somebody that does that and puts himself ahead of the team situation. I think Jalen Snead, in the past, particularly last year, was not always pleased with the number of reps that he's getting, and he probably feels that the same way now. I don't know why he would leave. It wasn't an injury situation. I don't know why he would leave the field ahead
after a win.
Yeah, after a win against a number 15 team that beat you last year, before you sing the alma mater. Not a good situation. I don't know where it goes from here, but it may be coming to a head if his actions are such and he's unhappy with the amount of snaps that he's getting. I don't know what
he is 5 games in, I will point out. Not
right.
4.
He probably should have thought about that after the last game, as opposed to now. But look, if you want more snaps, you need to be be more consistent. You need to be able to truly be 1/11th of the defense. And too frequently, he's not that. We all thought in preseason that this was going to be a big jump up year for him, but he's not getting the same amount of snaps that he wanted or that we thought he might get, which tells you that, what are you going to say? Al Golden's wrong? I mean, what you, I think,
Right. I wanted to pull this up. Sorry, JB, to cut you off. It's real fast. We're looking at KVA or Jalen Sneed to help. And he has a couple pressures. Jalen Sneed and KVA has a couple more. And Sneed has made some stops that Pro Football Focus defines as a failure he's done a good job behind the line attacking. We all remember the goal line chase down. He had a near sack or a sack this game, whatever you want to call it. In pure pass rush sets, Jalen Sneed is at the very end of Notre Dame's players' success rate, according to Pro Football Focus. He wins 18% of his pure pass rush sets. Like Jason Onye in a pure pass rush set is 46%, Botello is 45%, and KVA is 27%. So there is a difference. And maybe that's why he didn't get as much playing time.
Yeah, I was just going to note he only had 12 snaps in this game on Saturday, which stunned me.
Wow.
Because he only had 12 snaps, and you had Boubacar Traore with 11, and he left the game injured in the second quarter. I think it was.
It was still the first.
Yeah, there you go. So left that early in the game, never to return. Sneed only with 12. I think we all thought he had played very solidly against Miami. And we thought he was taking steps forward. He is tied for fourth on the team this season with 16 tackles. And he's got a handful of quarterback hurries and some 2 or 3 TFLs. But the consistency is what they're looking for. And I guess they didn't see it. And they needed, with what Louisville was doing on Saturday, a little bit more complex. They needed guys that they knew would play assignment sound football. And even if those guys were younger than Jalen Sneed, I think that's probably, whether they would say it or not, I think that factored heavily into how the rotation played itself out. Because Jaden Osbury has such high football.
I love having him on the field. Yeah.
And KVA has such high football instincts. So I think that's probably part of it. I understand why Sneed would have been frustrated. But yeah, that's as you said, TP, that's a big no-no.
And to be fair to Notre Dame fans, because I want to approach this from when I'm watching the game, I do the drive MVPs. Jalen Sneed's up there in that, but he does make plays you notice. That's why I don't do drive non-MVPs when a guy makes a mistake.
Right.
It's a positive stat. So he does things you notice. That's why he's going to be high in that. Riley Mills and Howard Cross don't do as many things you notice this year. They did last year, but I'm sure they're in higher standing with the Notre Dame coaching staff defensively than Jalen Sneed is, because they do their job properly.
I want to clarify, because when we say he's not consistent and then JB says he's fourth in tackles, that doesn't sound right. But the point is what you're saying, Tim.
Yep.
It's not so much the plays that he makes, it's the ones that he gives up by not being assignment correct.
Correct.
We don't, that 95% of the time, we don't know that he was not assignment correct. And that's what Al Golden is dinging him with in terms of snaps. 12 snaps, wow, that is not very many. If you can get him 24 a game, that's one thing. But who's going to question Al Golden's decision making with where his defense has been the last 2 years? And really, it was his first year was,
they still kept them viable. It was until the USC game. Yeah.
It was the red zone where they were so awful, for in his first year in the program. I think we have a tendency to say, okay, well, they weren't good in his first year, and now they're really good in second and third year. But that really isn't. They were awful in the red zone, but they did a lot of good things in Al Golden's first year. So who's going to question Al Golden's decision making on personnel at this point? Not too many. Jalen Sneed, probably so.
He probably will.
Yeah.
From Dr. Parnell, 42. How do you feel Leonard Moore played in his first start at cornerback?
Yeah, we touched upon this in segment one. He's everything that we thought we saw during the preseason. He's everything that the coaches and teammates have said about him. Um, I mean, Jaden Mickey's loss is Leonard Moore's gain, and Leonard Moore did more in that game than any game where Jaden Mickey was productive. So I mean, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, certainly for Leonard Moore, but also for an already really good secondary. Leonard Moore on the field more often makes them an even better secondary. Let's be real, you want Christian Gray back in the starting lineup.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you could see how animated Christian Gray was post game, that I do believe he was very close to playing in this contest. As for Leonard Moore, I think you've got to magnify what he did a little bit more, because he didn't come in and be forced to play like that against
The Navy or even a Miami of Ohio. He came in and did it against what I think we all agree is one of the premier offensive coaching systems and staffs, with Jeff Brom leading the way against Louisville. So it's not just that he survived his baptism by fire, but he survived it in flying colors in a lot of ways against one of the most difficult tests you could possibly have. And Stanford's got a nice throw game, and then USC late in the year will be one, and Leonard will be much better off for whatever role he plays in those games because of what he went through Saturday.
Tim,
76 snaps. Xavier Watts played 77. That's a pretty big compliment right there. Leonard
Holy
Moore,
cow.
76 snaps. Xavier
Holy
Watts,
cow.
77. He did give up 6 catches. Yeah, the touchdown was the bad one. On the other 5 catches, it was 5 catches for 36 yards and only 12 yards after the catch.
Yeah,
And he forced a fumble. So that's
I guess I shouldn't be surprised because there was really no one else to turn to. I mean, one day he wakes up and he's the number 4 cornerback, and then within a week he's starting.
Yeah, no, that's what I
so
meant.
that was a
1,
yeah.
2, and 3 from last year,
Yep.
from last week at this time, were not available.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. No, he did a sensational job. Tim, I'm going to jump ahead to Garrity 8 because of the nature of the question. JB
Okay.
started to touch upon this. This game was a reminder of why Jeff Brom is considered as one of the better play callers in the country. Some of the schemes he used to get guys open were fantastic. Who would you consider the best remaining play caller on the schedule? And before you answer that, I want to say that clock management, which was not handled particularly well by Jeff Brom on Saturday, is difficult when you're the head coach and you're the play caller. You can't do all of that.
Yeah.
And that was and so clock management was compromised a little bit by him being a play caller. He also said it was so loud in there that he wasn't able to communicate to Shuck at that time. I don't know exactly what, but as it relates to the answer to this question, I Troy Taylor, I agree, JB.
Yeah. I like that.
Definitely. I think that I think Miller Moss is going to be a handful when Notre Dame gets to him on the back end. Tim, who would you say?
I was going to say Troy Taylor is.
Yeah.
I like the way he calls the game. I don't think it's close, really, at this point.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Georgia Tech is so productive offensively. What's their OC's name, JB? Well, he's
Yeah, the guy for Buster Faulkner.
Faulkner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it's Troy Taylor and it's Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley, it's hard to discount.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I wasn't thinking that way. Of course, the offensive line coach, that's your offensive coordinator, isn't going to be calling the plays. So, yeah, Lincoln
Yeah.
Riley is pretty high on that list.
So for me, yeah, and it's interesting because I thought that was just a hell of a good point that you just brought up, TP, that clock management becomes magnified when you're the head coach and the play caller, and it's in a tense situation like it was. But Notre Dame's going to see that a couple more times this year with Troy Taylor and with Lincoln Riley, because those guys are running the show on offense, and those are 2 huge games for Notre Dame. So very interesting to note that 3 teams on Notre Dame's schedule have really gifted offensive-minded head coaches who still pretty much do run the show.
Okay, Tim, we're going to jump back up to ACTG Teach. What do you make of Marcus Freeman benching the fumblers, Ford and Price, on Saturday? Was he setting an expectation, or is benching for the whole game going too far?
Well, I don't care if it's going too far. I mean, it's not happy camp. If they want to bench somebody for fumbling, he can do it. It was a pretty costly play. I would guess that I would have. I don't have knowledge of this. I would guess Jadarian Price might have some issues holding on to the football in practice if he's getting benched after that. I don't think Price's inefficiency would be part of it. Because you know what you can get when he is efficient. He's still, I mean, he's wildly inefficient. He's now 11 efficient carries and 22 inefficient with a fumble loss at the 7-yard line. So that's not great. I wonder if part of it is, yeah, he still would have played him though, but he doesn't ever play short yardage. He has 0 short yardage carries on the season, and he doesn't ever pass protect on 3rd and long. So now you're down to just playing instead of Jeremiah Love. Is it a benching, or you just don't have many places to put him in? I mean, I guess it's both.
Yeah, I felt like they were definitely benched. We saw some changes to the special teams lineup after Ford fumbled. We see more Max Hurlman, the trust they have for him. He's got a fabulous story. Transfer kid from Colgate who played a bunch of different positions and was really good at Colgate and just had the dream of playing for Notre Dame. And now he's proved very valuable for Notre Dame on special teams. I think you give Notre Dame coaches a lot of credit for that. I would also contend it probably wasn't only a Marcus Freeman decision. I mean, Dylan McCullough
Absolutely.
is pretty adamant.
Yes.
I mean,
Oh.
what did he talk about? I like Dylan. I love visiting with Dylan because I feel like I'm getting half a sermon and half of a football education.
Well, I think it was a McCullough decision.
Oh, yeah. I'm
first
glad
and
you brought that up,
foremost.
JB. It was not a Marcus Freeman decision.
No.
It was 100% Dylan McCullough decision.
Well,
That's how
yeah,
it works.
because I want to note their whole theme going into this season when Dylan talked to us in August was lock the house. And he did an entire presentation about how they're supposed to lock the house. And that's what he calls securing the ball and bringing it home. And he was like, you lock the house and you don't let anybody come in your house when the house is locked. And those guys unlocked the front door on Saturday, and it nearly cost Notre Dame the game.
Tim, remember when Jeremiah Love was saying, I want to play all downs. I want to be excellent in pass protection. I can't vouch for every pass pro situation he was in Saturday, but I saw 4 of them that were outstanding, just absolutely outstanding. So,
and I see incredible trust in Aeneas Williams because he's not just the pass pro block now. They slipped him in there with some carries where they thought he had a toughness when they needed to try and make the next down maybe more manageable. They gave him a couple of runs. So I think that lets you know they're growing more and more trust in him, and he's earning that trust. It seems more and more on a daily basis.
By the way, not to go back, does Monken still call plays?
Oh yeah, I guess yeah.
That's pretty good. That you're going to see some stuff going on in that game. Jeff Monken.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah. I didn't mean to go back, but I didn't want to leave that guy out.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think he took it back over this year. They tried a bunch last year and tried to revamp their offense and make it more modern, and they went back to their roots, and he's back pretty much running the offensive show. So that's a great point. And since you brought up Army, and they played both Army and Navy this year, we touched on this on our Football Scoop podcast, but go America. The fact that Army and Navy are both undefeated right now.
Yeah.
That's all. Something. That's my side, but I love the heck out of that.
Well, and I mentioned the tail of the tape today. I know it's easier said than done, but let's get Aeneas Williams a few more touches because his have been very productive. I don't know what his percentage is. I think he only has 6 carries, but he looks like somebody that you can have a little bit of faith in as well. All right, moving on to Martin Evenflow. Most difficult games remaining. Navy, number 1. He lists them 1, Navy.
He likes it more
2,
than me.
Army. 3, USC. And Martin Evenflow says, change my mind.
Yeah, I'll change your mind because I am number 1 on the Navy is coming for 60 minutes, and it's going to be a major problem at noon on a Saturday with 1 week to prepare after Georgia Tech and Stanford. Navy is the second hardest game left of the schedule for Notre Dame. And I have another stat for Monday Musings. But USC is the hardest game left on the schedule. I am changing your mind. It has always been the hardest game on Notre Dame's schedule, 1 or 2 when they have to go out to USC. I wrote about it in the preseason. 2012, 2018, good Notre Dame teams, that game. And they're not as good as 2012 and 2018. Broken USC teams will play Notre Dame close. That this is going to be more of an even matchup. That USC is number 1. Come on.
I think USC is definitively number 1. Now, I was prepared to entertain that USC might not be the toughest when the Trojans were down 21-10 at halftime to a very middling Wisconsin team that I don't think is very good, and it's certainly super disappointing at this juncture of the Luke Fickell era. But I do still think it's USC, and Stanford didn't show well against Clemson, but they still got some explosiveness on their offense. They do, I think, maybe host Virginia Tech this weekend. I can't remember.
That's right. I think that's right.
But we talked about it. So I like what Notre Dame has coming in a couple of its key upcoming games, because Stanford doesn't have an open date this week. Notre Dame does. Then Stanford has to fly to South Bend. Then Notre Dame gets Stanford and goes to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's not off the weeks before that. Georgia Tech has maybe North Carolina and Duke or something in that stretch. So I like the way those matchups shake out for the Irish, but I think it's probably USC, and then I might go Army. Over Navy, and then Stanford, and then peter it out however you want to from there.
All right. So we mentioned 5 in this little conversation here. We mentioned 5 of the 7 teams remaining on Notre Dame's schedule.
I know where you're going, and they don't
And
count.
who would have thought that we wouldn't even have mentioned Florida State?
No.
Virginia's the other one. That is home, and that's senior day. But
They are going to
mention.
bulldoze.
Well, they
They
certainly should. Now it's 6 weeks. Florida State has 6 weeks to regather itself and become a legitimate football team. But right now, there's no reason to think that's going to happen.
Do you want to take the bet? Anybody want this bet?
No, when you have your roster filled with mercenaries or transfer portal players to that extent, and there's not jack left to play for, you're going to have a hell of a hard time holding it together at Florida State.
Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Florida State. Notre Dame is going to beat those 3 teams in the aggregate more than they're going to beat Army, Navy, and Stanford.
No, that's a good call. That's interesting.
USC is not involved at all in this conversation.
Yeah.
Let's post this and pin it to the board. And
we are going to.
Back and
I'm telling you, man. Navy with 3 days of real prep. I'm going to ask Marcus Freeman during Stanford week if they've started preparing for Navy like Brian Kelly used to. I'm not going to say Brian Kelly's name, but I'm going to ask them if they started preparing because otherwise they have 3 days to prepare for Navy and a good offense and quarterback. Because remember, they would just there would be a segment. There would be 1 week in August where a scout team would go against it for Navy. I mean, you think you have to. I know Army doesn't run the triple option, and Navy's is different too, but you still have to do preparation for 2 teams. I would hope that it would happen again in the bye week.
Yeah, and I thought that maybe it did happen this summer. So we'll be curious. Yep. Maybe be mindful of all of us to try and remember to ask that. But I do want to say that I believe I was told Notre Dame has already done some preparation for both Army and Navy in the preseason.
Good. That'll keep it close at least. Just kidding. Go ahead.
All right, we'll wrap it up here. We will be back on Thursday, like always, despite the break from this Saturday. But we're going to finish up with ever to excel. Have you ever seen a more unhappy fan base of a 4-1 top 15 team with 2 wins over ranked opponents?
I'd say maybe check the pulse in Athens this morning, because that's a pretty pissed off Georgia fan base, especially the way that the Bulldogs nearly got run out of the stadium. But it's a well conceived point with that question, because there is a lot of gnashing of teeth because Riley Leonard's not always pretty at quarterback. And look, you're paying, and you will pay for the rest of this year unless you go 11-1 and host a playoff game. For the remainder of this year, you will pay for the sins of the Northern Illinois loss, and in a lot of ways, you should pay for the sins of the Northern Illinois loss.
Yeah, the Northern Illinois thing is just a giant issue if it says 4-1 with a loss to a 29-point favorite to a MAC team that keeps getting its butt kicked all over the field every time it plays later on. I mean, that is the crux of the question. I will say the last time this happened, Notre Dame was 3-2, beating Texas number 13 and Washington number 15, but they lost to Ohio State. Good Lord, that schedule, and also to Northwestern, the famous year '95. The program wasn't that unhappy when that was going on. This is a more unhappy. This feels more unhappy, although social media is part of it, of course. People don't like watching this offense. That is what I've noticed. Yeah. I think that's the thing.
And again, like sometimes you wear stuff aggregately. And I had this talk a decade ago with Butch Jones when Tennessee absolutely wilted in the fourth quarter of a loss to Florida. And I was like, Butch, you got to realize you may not have been here, but you've lost 10 times in a row to Florida.
Yeah,
I bring that up here and that the extrapolation is you're wearing this Northern Illinois loss even more because it's not been a one-off under Marcus Freeman. It's been Marshall, it's been Stanford, it's been almost Cal, it's been being super flat at Clemson last year, and it's Northern Illinois this year. So there is some aggregate. You wish you could view this in the microcosm of, hey, they're 4-1. Texas A&M keeps winning, by the way. They're up to 21 or 19 in the coaches poll. And then they just beat a Louisville team that we all have tremendous respect for. But that one really bad loss reminds them of things that they hated about 22 and 23.
Yeah, and nobody blames the fan base for being disgruntled. We're not going to relitigate it every week. We're not going to, I mean,
Right.
Riley Leonard is the quarterback, good
not
or
close.
bad or whatever. He's going to be the starting quarterback. So he's playing good football now. You notice there's no questions here today about replacing Riley Leonard. There
were some questions that
there
were
were
included.
questions submitted, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that every week. I mean, he's playing well right now, and so we're going to set that aside. We understand all of his blemishes.
Don't you agree, though? It's because Notre Dame's offense is not fun to watch.
Well, no, it's not. It's not fun.
That's
It
why
wasn't
there's so
fun
much
for
moments,
us to
though.
watch either. And
It's got moments where it's fun to watch, I think.
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, look, we understand the frustration, but Riley Leonard's a starting quarterback, and when he plays poorly again, then we will entertain those questions again. He's doing a pretty good job right now recently, and it hasn't been necessarily against world beaters, but he did just beat a good Louisville team that I don't think is going to lose a whole lot the rest of the year. What do you got, T.O.?
He's the Senior Bowl Offensive Player of the Week. That's all you need to know. How in the world is that possible? So, like, I don't want people are screaming right now about he played well last week. He played well for a quarter and a half and then another drive. He played pretty. Notre Dame's offense stunk for more than half.
Well, I realize that, but
I just gave you the 9 stats, 31% efficiency.
I
9
understand,
drives.
but did they not change what they were doing offensively in the second half?
Yeah, but I mean, we can't. It's not all on Mike Denbrock, right? If he thought Riley Leonard could complete the passes, he would do it, wouldn't he?
If they don't call plays for him to be successful, of course it's not all on Denbrock. I don't consider anything all on one thing in anything we ever talk about.
I guess I'm saying if he was so effective in the first quarter, we have to talk about how ineffective he was the other quarters.
I would also contend, and I don't know how we could ask this and get a straight question. I would contend they went heavy run more and more as the game went along because they were so beaten and banged up on the defensive side of the ball that they were absolutely trying to shrink the game and melt the clock. And I think it started.
And they just couldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it started even. I think that the defensive attrition absolutely played directly into Notre Dame's offensive game plan, more so this game than in any other game this season.
I agree with that. But Tim, you were also saying the offensive line was getting its ass kicked in the second half.
They were, but Riley Leonard has something to do with the failures of 3 quarters if he's lauded as the first quarter.
Of course he does.
So I don't think he played that well in that whole football game.
Okay, I agree. I do agree with that. He played well,
better than he has. It's also tough to stomach.
I'm not it's not that I'm in this to be a defender of Riley Leonard. It's that the coaching staff has made a decision.
I know, but I've never once argued the backup quarterback should play other than when he was hurt against NU.
You're right.
I'm saying empirically, the guy is on the field. He didn't play great against this team. He played really well for a quarter.
Did I say great? I said he had played well early.
I don't know if he played well.
Some of that has to do with the menu that he was given in the second half. Some of that has to do with the offensive line getting its butt kicked.
Of course it does, but the menu was... We're still crediting him for the menu of the first quarter then. He has to adjust. You think they trust Riley Leonard to throw the way you watch that second half?
No, they don't.
That means he's not playing that well.
No, that means that they don't trust him. He was playing well in the first half. They didn't trust him to put themselves in a position for him to make a mistake that would sway the game in the other direction.
They trusted him to throw it when the damn game was on the line, and what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown drive. He has
to throw a football in the second half. There was 9 minutes left. He threw a pass.
Look, I think
I am
think
not arguing for change. I'm just
I know.
saying, like, this is the babiest of baby steps that he threw a pass to Jaden Harrison for 34 yards and a
I
throwback
agree.
screen.
I agree. I agree. You know,
Screen.
I totally agree. I think the offense is a mess in a lot of ways. It's a mess in a lot of ways. And it's Riley Leonard. It's, you know, Mike Denbrock knew what he was inheriting. It's not a great situation.
He did try to
He
warn us more than I thought.
he
It
did.
took me a
He
while to realize
did.
how much he was warning us. I was like, oh, that's
He
like the fourth
did, but
time you
he
mentioned
has
that.
to do
Yeah.
a better job too. The offensive line has to do a better job too. It's not a good situation right now. And so when Riley Leonard does put together a few good drives, yeah, you know, you have to accentuate those two. I'm not saying he's a world beater. What I am saying is the offense is not in a really good state right now. Fortunately, they scored 3 touchdowns in the first quarter last week.
That was one
Right.
heck of a beginning. That was one heck of a script they pulled out
All
there,
right,
man.
we're
That
out
was
of here.
really
We're
good.
wrapping up. We're going to be back on Thursday. What is the date of Thursday? We're into October by Thursday.
JB won't be here, and I'm going to be here talking about screen passes. They trust seniors.
October 3rd is Thursday's date is October 3rd. I will
We,
not
we will be
be
back for
here.
that. JB won't be here.
The mountains are calling and I must go.
You must do that, and we want to enjoy yourself. Until then, Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley, John Bryce. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.